Hello and welcome to another episode of our podcast Female Perspectives on the Democratic Transitions in Europe. In this podcast series, we focus on the 70s, 80s and 90s, and together with colleagues from Bulgaria, Slovenia, Italy, Spain and Croatia, we are talking to some of the key figures of that time. What we are specifically interested in is the role of women in the democratic transitions in Europe, their perspectives on the historical events and their aftermath today. My name is Diana Todorova and I will be your host today. With my guests in this episode, we will talk about Croatia's path towards democratization, as illustrated in the actions of the Antiwar Campaign of Croatia. The Antiwar Campaign was an initiative launched in the summer of 1991 in Zagreb. It became one of the most important opposition voices in Croatia, gathering antimilitarist, pacifist and civic groups and activists. This network of people contributed greatly to the development of civil society in Croatia, and in particular to the establishment and promotion of peace building, as well as the protection of human rights. A time that saw the dissolution of Yugoslavia. For Croatia, the 90s meant a transition from a member state of the Socialist Federation to a newly independent capitalist state. The period was marked by the Croatian War of Independence that lasted from 1991 to 1995 and resulted in more than 20,000 victims. One could argue that the 90s were a difficult time for people who wanted to preserve civility and a sense of human rights. To look into that and to explore female perspectives on that time, on the 4th of July 2023, that is the 32nd anniversary of the establishment of the Antiwar Campaign, I met with Vesna Teršelić, Vesna Janković and Goran Bužičević, three of the key activists of the Antiwar Campaign. We invited a group of teachers from Croatia and other European countries to join us in the marking of the anniversary of the Anti-War Campaign. Together, we participated in a commemorative walk around different locations in the center of Zagreb connected with the history of the Anti-War Campaign. And no better guides for this walk could be secured than Vesna Teršelić, Vesna Janković and Goran Bužičević, who shared testimonies of the initiative. After the walk, we continued our conversation about the anti-war campaign, its magazine Argzin, the volunteer project Pakrac, and other aspects of the initiative in the Human Rights House in Zagreb.
We spoke a lot today about the anti-war campaign and your personal involvement in it. And we several times mentioned Argzin, and we mentioned the charter that was published. So to begin this discussion, I would like to pass along the room some of the archival issues of the fanzine of Argzin that we keep. So please be gentle. And you can have a look and see how the fanzine looked. And I would like to ask Vesna Janković, who was the editor of most of the issues of Argzin, because it also had its development, its natural history, and it was evolving, and to tell us a bit about the topics that were in this fanzine, and also to tell us about the pages that were usually 18 and 19, the so-called ženske stranice, the female pages. What were the topics?
First of all, when we started, the idea was to cover peace activities, but also as anti-war campaign was built as a network of organizations in which green and feminist organizations were also members. The idea was to cover all these issues, like not just peace and human rights, but also green issues and women issues. Also alternative culture, music. This is the secret of the pages.
Investment, just to add something to give the group more context about art scene in the media environment of Croatia in the 90s. Because war, as we know, brings along censorship and state-controlled information.
Yes, one of the reasons for our decision to change the format and to go as a newspaper bi-weekly, so every second Friday, was the change in media scape of Croatia. Namely, from 1991 to 1993, what was happening was the state managed to put control over major media outlets. Television, radio, biggest newspapers. There were some private newspapers, but those private ones were even more nationalistic and warmongering. One of it was Slobodni Tjednik, 3 weekly, which was publishing really lists of names of people of Serbian nationality or whatever political affiliation they don't like. And the other was Weekly Globus, which was also private, but it was also more like in search of this profit-making themes. As I said, actually a lot of journalists lost their jobs. Some voluntarily quit because they didn't want to be part of the propaganda machine. Argzin was one of the places where they could publish without censorship.
If you want to go through the pages of Argzin yourself, click the link in the description of this episode to explore the online archive of Argzin.
And now to move on to the other Vesna. It is for me always fascinating when we talk about that period and when we visit the places, how you remember those times. Yes, we were there, the soldiers were playing with bombs, and that was the reality of it. But can you tell us more, aside from the anecdotes, about the reality of leading an anti-war movement that is operating in a country in the position to defend itself? So this is a country that is being attacked, and people feel the need to protect their homes and their relatives. And then there's you, and you're advocating for peace. How does it look like?
The question is how precisely I actually remember how it felt. And being an optimist, in that autumn of 91, when war was really getting more intense and more severe, I somehow had an idea that war will be rather short. So this is something what was helpful. Rather short meaning 1 or 2 years. And that myself and others will be dealing with these new anti-war peace issues for rather short time, and then we'll keep doing what we planned and hoped and wanted before the war. And our hopes were actually big. We lived through the 80s in a spirit of increasing space for freedom of expression, for civic initiatives, for expression of political opinions, and somehow expected it's going to be better and better and better. And what happened was severe cut. It was actually complete change. Much later, I learned that this kind of ending of democratization processes and traveling back in sense of having less liberties and having less opportunities, it's a matter of social development, and there are no guarantees. I remember that I had the anger that we actually had to more or less stop environment protection issues. Exactly in time when in the world it was the richest time for environment protection debate. Just to remind you, in 1992, there was first big UN conference on environment and development, where the issues which we are discussing now related to climate change have been already debated, and for us it was simply that we had to deal with war, supporting survivors. We had to learn all new things about promoting nonviolence, supporting conscientious objectors, direct protection of people who have been evicted from their flats, speaking with families of the ones who forcibly disappeared and they couldn't find any information about them. So it's that this learning of lesson that democratization is not given, but there are processes like war, like social regression, which you actually cannot really stop. The way how we have chosen the name Antiwar Campaign was also a lesson in itself, because we have chosen in summer of 91 a name Antiwar Campaign, and very soon war was so intense that it was absolutely 100% clear to us that neither we nor our colleagues in Serbia or Bosnia and Herzegovina will not manage to stop the war. That this is completely above our capacities, that war has its own logic of feeding new and new military steps, and we thought, well, maybe we should have chosen something with non-violence or peace. But it was too late, because once you choose a name and you design your logo and your visual identity, and some newspapers, not very many, but some write an article or two about you, it's not time to change your name. And then we had all that social pressure from people who felt now it's only time for defense, only possible form of action is actually supporting the soldiers. And there we were, supporting conscientious objectors who said, no, we want to do something else, we do want to contribute, but in other way, civilian way. And I also have to say that there have been also a lot of debates between us, as we basically, after fall of Vukovar on 18th of November 1991, stayed in a very small group, less than 20 people. We have been very oriented on each other and have been debating what to do. And it's also that between us, some were pure pacifists, saying there is only important to actually promote non-violent ways. And others said, but well, soldiers are defending the country exactly on their places and in their villages, so they have full right to defend the country. But we had a lot of debates. Should we advocate only pacifism, or it's okay to say that soldiers are defending country which is attacked by forces of Yugoslav army and Serbian paramilitaries? So it's that not just that we debated about Croatia. Later, when war had started in Bosnia and Herzegovina, it was not possible to reach a unified position on how to defend Bosnia and Herzegovina. So it's that we had two different positions. That some said for Bosnia and Herzegovina it's really important to only promote non-violence, and others said no, now it's time for bombing. Only possible defense of Bosnia and Herzegovina goes through bombing, and it's that we had a full spectrum of opinions. I would say it was not easy time, but we just kept making steps. And I personally, it's just making one step after other. So it's not planning in the long run. It's just you respond to needs which are there. That was a way how Suncokret as organization working with refugee and displaced children started. That was how Center for Women War Victims started to work with survivors of rape and sexual violence in Croatia and Bosnia and Herzegovina. So it's you just go with emerging needs. It is not very much that you kind of have very defined plans. We had our outline plan, which we defined in August 91, about promoting nonviolence, supporting conscientious objectors, having Argzin as a magazine, and whenever possible giving support to ones whose rights were violated. But then the new steps were just emerging as needs have been arising. And I would say that contributing in harsh situations makes your life meaningful. You can actually keep looking back and think where we could have been if we would do what we planned to do in 1990. Or you contribute something in a situation as it is and keep working on new paths. And still we are there. I recall when first time it became clear that in conservative Croatia, led by conservative Croatian Democratic Alliance, led by late President Tuđman, the first time started a discussion, will abortion law remain as it was? As in Croatia since 1976, abortion up to the 8th week of pregnancy was freely available, and then suddenly conservative voices started discussing, shall there be a change? And I was really upset. It was like, well, we have this right. Why someone would even think about changing this legislation? Look at us now. Look at United States. Look the way how the Supreme Court of United States have changed the regulation and what it means for women. So it's that this kind of, struggling for this or that cause and suddenly experiencing that reproductive rights of women might be endangered again. It's not given, it's not granted. It's kind of similar, it's when you find yourself in a war that of course you feel it's unjust, but then you keep making steps to make coping with it somehow less horrible. You keep responding to the needs.
And there were many needs to respond to. As mobilization was underway and men were getting notices to join the fighting, the anti-war campaign supported conscientious objectors who didn't want or couldn't take part in the armed conflict. The activists were helping men in declaring objection to military service and demanding civilian service. And there were other urgent matters that the anti-war campaign was dealing with. Under the rule of the newly established Croatian democracy, some violations of human rights were associated with Croatia's socialist past. Property that belonged to Yugoslavia's Communist Party, the Yugoslav Army, or other federal organs of former Yugoslavia was transferred to the Croatian government, which then forced the eviction of people formerly affiliated with organs of the previous regime.
What was happening, what was usual practice, unfortunately, was evictions. This could be either people from Serbian nationality or families of Yugoslav army officers, because Zagreb was seat of the 5th Army Command area. So a lot of Yugoslav military officers had their apartments, their family lived here, even buildings, several buildings in Zagreb were built for them. And when the war began, there was a sort of open hunt for apartments. Usually these evictions were done by armed people in uniforms. We heard that they got information about the addresses from the Croatian military headquarters, and those people came to us and asked for help. So what we've been doing was sometimes evictions were announced in advance. So we would come and sit in the apartment with the tenants We also had quite a good connection with international press, and quite a lot of international journalists were based in Zagreb, also some international organizations. So we would inform these organizations. Sometimes journalists would come and sit, and we did manage to at least postpone some of these evictions, and we managed with some other human rights organizations to make it an issue, political issue, and to put international pressure on Croatian government to stop these practices. Several times there were some physical attacks. Several activists were attacked during these occasions, but none was killed, luckily.
The anti-war campaign, together with the United Nations and peace initiatives from Austria, participated in the launch of an international volunteer camp in the town of Pakrac, known as the Volunteer Project Pakrac. During the war, Pakrac was heavily destroyed and divided between Croatian control and the Republic of Serbian Krajina. From January 1992 until May 1995, Pakrac was within the United Nations Protected Area West. Organized by the Volunteer Project Pakrac, the international volunteers helped the reconstruction of homes and social infrastructure. They were also helping in the organization of community services for women, elderly and disabled people, as well as youth in Pakrac. Goran Božičević was a co-founder of the Volunteer Project Pakrac.
In the morning with Goran, we were discussing the Pakrac Volunteer Project. And today, as it happens, it's the 30th anniversary, right, Goran?
30 years that volunteers came to Zagreb. In 2 days will be that they came to Pakrac, yes.
So how does it look day to day? You have people coming from different countries to this place that is in ruins, and they do what? They sleep where? How do they communicate with people, and how do you keep safe?
First is selection, and without Service Civil International and their branches, we would have very difficult task, probably impossible. But because of branches all over Europe mostly, even though we had also from North America, Australia, Canada, someone from Chile was also, and from Russia, it was possible. And they were coming, already being kind of filtered or selected in their countries, and they would come to Zagreb, stay for 2 days for preparation training, very well made by our colleagues, Aida Bagic and others were doing, Marina Škrabalo later, just to tell them where they go. They go to the front line, they are going to hear shooting every night, but it's hopefully nothing dangerous. And they will work on reconstruction there. At the beginning, they worked till 6 o'clock in the morning till 2 p.m., joining local people in cleaning the ruins around the town. Around 200 local people were organized, funded by Ministry of Defense, which means lunch and any other equipment. So local people were actually cleaning their own town, which helped life in town, but helped their mental health. I'm back in my town, but now I'm useful, I'm doing something. Internationals joined them and brought needed normality into that. Problem was that volunteers started to complain. We had coffee break, we had cigarette break, we had break, then we had rakia break, then we had another break for this. I didn't come here to have breaks, I want to help. And we said, you are helping with your presence. Just be with people, be there. So we had meetings, sometimes on daily level, or 2 or 3 times a week, discussing all kinds of things. At the beginning, we were put in a so-called pedagogical school, former school, 2 classrooms. Locals put us men and women, and we changed that policy immediately. And we were sleeping in sleeping bags. We had shower once a week in a nearby town of Lipik, We had some running water around us, pretty poor, but nothing worse than local people they had there. And soon we started activities, social activities in town there.
So at this point, I would maybe open the floor for the first round of your questions.
I would like to ask, how come, for me, as a history teacher, that I don't know about this magazine, which is great, and I already found like 10 ideas how to put it in my classroom.
Great.
So how come? Is it my problem that I don't know that, or is it my fault, or what's the issue here? It's maybe a tough question.
Can we just start clapping, because we are very interested in the same topic, and we wanted to ask what is the situation about the public discourse on anti-war campaign?
It is a big paradox that for us it was much easier to work with teachers in 92, 93, 94. I think 95 was already getting problematic.
Yes.
So it's that the system of professional education for teachers have changed and we have been out. So it's a very painful and very slow process, especially regarding topics like this. I mean, we're a country which in 2000 have adopted in Croatian Parliament Declaration on Homeland War with very narrowed interpretation of Homeland War. We are between the few countries in the world, especially between few democratic countries in the world, which has such kind of framework, because to me it always looks a bit funny, you know, the Parliament is passing a declaration which is telling us what is the dominant historical interpretation.
We had a question about the anti-war campaign in the public narrative, and maybe Vesna and Goran can share their thoughts on that. Is the anti-war
What
campaign...
are you suggesting, that we ignore questions or that we laugh at questions? I'm not sure.
Is it in the public narrative?
More than some years ago. So when we visited Rijeka University, some students recognized some photos and said, we know it is Pakrac. We learned about it from our professor. So then we come what Vesna was saying, some individuals are doing good job. But let's be honest, I'm not sure did you get it or not yet. I mean, I don't want to be cynical, but you know, our parliament declared the truth, and you have problem with that. What's the problem with that, you know? I mean, we have truth given, so let's do something else. Why to challenge that? So that is the main discourse in this country. And we have Catholic Church behind it. And they are very long and respected institutions. So why should we challenge them? So it is given. And we try to do some kind of Don Quixote stuff, you know, and they like us because there are few of us and we are nice and do some kind of, you know, cheerful things. But basically, this country has its truth. They are stealing national resources on daily level. We are selling everything we have here in this country. You know, it's kind of given thing. And talking about public discourse, I would say this is powerful question. I learned from Vesna a long time ago 2 things we can do in peace work. It's asking questions, and we can do active listening to people when it's needed. And asking question is important. And I teach at peace studies, what I mentioned, and new generations are coming, and they are really angry. Slightly younger than most of you here. They say, like, why you were not supported in the 90s for your important work? And I was thinking, like, how nice question it is. I mean, we were happy to survive. And at this moment, they're angry that we were not supported by government. Because what we were doing in 90s, Croatian state was doing in 2010s. It was adjusting to EU standards. We simply wanted rule of law. We simply wanted somehow that people could feel safe. Simply wanted that law would be equal for everyone in a room. Nothing special. It's not about love for Serbs or love of this or that. It's just like they have a right on this apartment. You cannot evict them. You know, the whole structure of justice is collapsing if it's happening. So the state was doing that 20 years after to prove to the European Union we are good ones. And one moment in 2013, we entered the European Union, and most of the people were happy because we don't need to behave anymore. Now we can be really nasty because we like to be nasty, you know. and that is. And then in 2016, we have fascists in the government, and we have cancelled half of institutions. And then somehow we realized, oh, it's going too far, you know, like we are coming close to to take votes out of women, you know. And I'm saying we are not far from that. Someone would say women doesn't need to vote. Why would you vote? I mean, go home and take care about kids. Why you don't need to be involved in politics? And you may say, like, what is he talking? But we have a bunch of people really putting that on political agenda. And just to finish, what Vesna is saying, democracy is constant fight. It is, and we try to do something. And is it in public narrative? I don't know, to be honest, what to tell you. So I would say, yeah, we are not welcome in public discourse, we are tolerated.
And if there are no other questions, just one very short remark about what you can do, what you cannot do, expectations and so on. As Vesna said, in the autumn of 1991 there were just a couple of us left in the Antiwar campaign, and I remember we were sitting at one meeting and, you know, what to do. It really felt like darkness is falling, the possibilities for action is shrinking. And then Vesna said, and I quite often quote it, Vesna said, like, wow, what we can do is to keep the candle burning, in the sense of keeping the awareness and values which we know are endangered with this nationalism, repatriarchalization, retraditionalization, and so on. So, there are just a couple of us. But then, today, the city of Zagreb is run by a left-green platform, which in many ways is possible by what we were doing in the 90s. And with all organizations which were born within this field we created with this single candle. So you never know. I mean, you take one step at a time, but when you look back, then you see actually quite a long road we traveled.
With time, out of the network of the anti-war campaign, many civil society organizations were established, contributing to democratization processes in Croatia.
The transitions we had, one, it was transition during war and transition after the war, but then you had this transition from socialism to capitalism. We have witnessed criminal privatization, in which basically most of factories and most of industries were suddenly finishing in hands of people who never have been running even a small team of 3 persons, suddenly running a factory of several thousand employees, leading to kind of deindustrialization. So it's that Croatia was once upon a time a strong industrial entity, and then found itself practically without some branches of industry. For example, we have been large in shipbuilding. Well, it disappeared practically. It have taken a time. This dismantling was long, but it finished in actually disappearance of old shipyards. We had a parallel process of learning some new things and introducing some new skills and some new knowledge and then seeing how the knowledge which was already there and people knew how to do things are sidelined and it's not appreciated. So it's kind of, it's that things are happening on different layers. On some you see how things are dismantled, on others you see that there are some new possibilities opening. It's still happening, it's still unfolding. So it's that, with this concept of transition, which is most simply defined transition from less to more democracy, there is this inbuilt expectation, and someday will really become democratic, and that will be granted democracy. But that's not really happening. It is that democratization is ongoing process which has steps forward and then regression, and this regression might be rather long, and the question is who will survive that, who will actually keep sanity and energy to keep working. I would say when you work with people, like we work with each other today, then things are always happening. You always meet interested people, and especially when you work with young people, it makes a sense. You keep producing meaning all the time. But there is always this feeling of possible depression because of all these setbacks, of all this regression. Always returning. There is no guarantee that we'll keep moving on. And, when I was small, going in elementary school, I somehow expected that history is a road in which we are just progressing. But then it came out in different way. Well, these are ongoing struggles. And I do think it's important to continue. I believe that also in this program we can cooperate on making more female life stories visible, and hope that it will be used in the schools and in a public space.
Thank you so much.
If you want to find out more about the topic, consider the book The Antiwar Campaign, The Untold Story, that is linked in the description of this episode. Thank you for listening. This podcast is produced in the scope of the project Female Perspectives on the Democratic Transitions in the 70s, 80s and 90s. The project is co-financed by the European Union. Views and opinions expressed are, however, those of the authors only and do not necessarily reflect those of the European Union or EACEA. Neither the European Union nor the granting authority can be held responsible for them.